Commander Vox stood tall among his people, the Arcani. His silver scales glimmered under the three suns of their homeworld, Taro. At 8 feet tall with powerful limbs and a keen tactical mind, he had led the Arcani fleet to 17 consecutive victories against the invading Morex swarms. The Morex, insectoid creatures with a hive mind, had been steadily consuming worlds across the Orion Arm for centuries. "The southern quadrant is secure, Commander," reported Lieutenant Dax, Vox's most trusted officer. "The Morex have retreated beyond the Cygnus boundary." Vox nodded, his elongated head bobbing slightly as he studied the holographic map. "They will regroup. They always do. But we've bought ourselves time." What neither of them said aloud was, that time was running out. Each victory came at greater cost, and the Arcani population was dwindling. Their advanced technology had kept them ahead of the Morex, but only barely. Then came the transmission. "Commander, we're receiving a signal from an unidentified vessel approaching from the Terran sector," said Communications Officer Lyra. "They're broadcasting on all frequencies." Vox frowned. The Terran sector contained a relatively new spacefaring species that called themselves humans. The Arcani had observed them from afar but never made contact. Humans were considered primitive, emotional, and unpredictable, hardly worth diplomatic relations. "Put it through," Vox ordered. The holographic display flickered, and a face appeared. It was pink-skinned with brown fur on top. A human male Vox recognized from their observation data. "This is Captain Jack Reed of the Earth Alliance vessel. Horizon, we've been monitoring the conflict in this sector. We propose an alliance against the Morex threat." Murmurs rippled through the command center. Alliance? With primitives? The idea was absurd. "Captain Reed," Vox responded with carefully measured politeness. "The Arcani appreciate your offer, but this conflict is beyond your species' capabilities. For your own safety, we suggest you return to your territory." The human didn't seem offended. Instead, he smiled, a peculiar baring of teeth that humans use to express positive emotions. "With respect, Commander, we've successfully repelled 3 Morax incursions in our outer colonies. We have tactical information that could be valuable to you." Vox's inner eyelids flickered in surprise. The humans had fought the Morax and survived? Impossible. "Send your tactical data. We will evaluate it," Vox finally said. Within hours, the Arcani High Command was in an uproar. The human data was comprehensive and included weaknesses in Morex, biology and behavior that the Arcani had never discovered in centuries of warfare. "This changes everything," Dax whispered. 3 days later, the human ship Horizon docked with the Arcani command station. Captain Reed stepped onto Arcani territory, the first human to do so in history. He was accompanied by his senior officers, and one peculiar creature, a 4-legged beast with fur that Reed called a dog, named Max. "My service companion," Reed explained when he noticed the Arcani staring. "On Earth, these animals work alongside humans in many capacities. Max, here, is trained for combat situations and threat detection." Vox found the notion primitive, but said nothing. If humans needed lesser creatures to compensate for their own sensory deficiencies, that was their concern. What mattered was their unexpected knowledge about the Morex. The alliance was formed cautiously. Human ships joined Arcani battle groups, their unorthodox tactics proving surprisingly effective. And against all odds, the humans themselves earned grudging respect. They were resilient, adaptable, and possessed a quality the Arcani struggled to understand, what the humans called intuition. Most puzzling of all to Vox was the inexplicable bond between the humans and their animal companions. The dog Max was present at every strategic meeting, lying quietly at Reed's feet, occasionally receiving affectionate touches from its master. 1 month into the alliance, disaster struck. A Morax scout ship penetrated Arcani defenses and targeted the command station. Though the attack was repelled, the station suffered severe damage. Vox found himself trapped in a collapsed corridor with Captain Reed and Max. The human was bleeding from a head wound, yet his first concern was for his animal. "Are you all right, boy?" Reed whispered, checking the creature for injuries. Max whimpered but appeared unharmed. "We must reach the emergency command center," Vox said, unable to comprehend the human's priorities. "Your wound needs attention." "I'll be fine," Reed insisted. tearing a strip from his uniform to bind his head. Max detected the Morax ship before your sensors did. That's why he was barking earlier. If we'd listened, that animal cannot detect spaceships, Vox interrupted, his patience wearing thin. We should focus on facts, Captain, not superstitions. About your pet. Reed fell silent, but Vox noticed a hardening in his expression. Humans were sensitive about their companion animals, a weakness the Arcani commander filed away for future reference. They navigated the damaged corridors, eventually reaching a junction where the ceiling had collapsed completely. No way through, Vox concluded after examining the debris. We must find another route. Max suddenly began pawing at the rubble, whining insistently. He hears something, Reed said, dropping to his knees beside the animal. Someone might be trapped on the other side. Vox was about to dismiss this notion when his audio receptors picked up a faint sound. Tapping. There was indeed someone beyond the blockage. Working together, Vox and Reed cleared enough debris to create a small opening. Lieutenant Dax and 3 injured Arcani were on the other side, one critically wounded. The medical bay is destroyed, Dax reported grimly. Lyra won't survive without treatment. Reed whistled softly to Max, who trotted to his side. From a pouch on the dog's tactical vest, Reed retrieved a compact medical kit. This contains universal coagulants and pain management compounds. He explained, passing it through the opening. It's designed for human physiology, but it might stabilize her until we can get proper help. Vox watched in disbelief as Dax applied the human medicine, and Lyra's readings began to stabilize. These primitives had just saved the life of an Arcani officer. Over the next few days, as repairs to the station progressed, Vox observed the human-animal bond more carefully. Max helped locate survivors in the debris, detected a gas leak before the station's sensors, and seemed to provide emotional comfort to injured humans. It was functional, in ways Vox hadn't anticipated. The alliance deepened as joint operations against the Morax continued. Human ships, though technologically inferior, proved remarkably effective when paired with Arcani vessels. Their captains were unpredictable, employing strategies no logical species would consider. Yet, somehow, they worked. Captain Reed became a regular presence in strategic planning, with Max always at his side. The dog grew accustomed to the Arcani and no longer bristled at their scent. Some of the younger Arcani even began to interact with the creature, fascinated by its loyalty and intelligence. Vox found himself reluctantly impressed by the humans' contribution. Their emotional nature, which he had considered a weakness, drove them to take risks the more logical Arcani would avoid. Risks that often paid off. Then came the Battle of Cygnus Gate. The Morax launched a massive counterattack, concentrating their forces on the strategic Cygnus Gate, a spatial anomaly that provided rapid transit between 3 star systems. If the gate fell, the Arcani homeworld would be exposed. The battle raged for 36 hours. Human and Arcani ships fought side by side, their complementary tactics holding the line against overwhelming odds. Captain Reed's Horizon took heavy damage but maintained position, covering the Arcani flagship's vulnerable flank. Vox's command center buzzed with frantic activity as reports flooded in. Casualty lists grew longer by the hour. The Morax were adapting to their joint tactics faster than anticipated. We need something they won't expect. Reed's voice came through the comm, strained but determined. Max could be heard barking in the background. Permission to break formation and execute Maneuver Theta. Vox hesitated. Maneuver Theta was a human tactic that involved using a ship as bait to draw enemy forces into a trap. It was dangerously unpredictable. Exactly the kind of emotional, high-risk strategy that the Arcani would never consider. Negative, Captain. The risk is... We don't have time to calculate odds, Reed interrupted. The Morax are about to break through Sector 7. If they do, we lose everything. Lieutenant Dax looked up from his console. Commander, our simulations suggest the human may be right. Vox's inner eyelids flickered rapidly, a sign of stress. Execute Maneuver Theta, he finally ordered. What followed was chaos by Arcani standards, but brilliant improvisation by human ones. The Horizon veered directly toward the largest concentration of Morax ships, weapons blazing. As the enemy swarm converged to destroy the seemingly suicidal Vessel, Arcani ships executed a pincer movement, catching the Morax in a devastating crossfire. The tide turned. Within hours, the Morax were in retreat, leaving behind the wreckage of hundreds of their ships. But the victory came at a terrible price. The horizon was crippled, life support failing, its hull breached in multiple sections. Emergency extraction teams to launch Bay 3, Vox ordered, surprised by the urgency in his own voice. Priority 1. The rescue operation recovered 63 human survivors from the horizon, less than half its crew. Captain Reed was among them, severely injured but alive. Max had shielded his master during the final explosion, taking shrapnel that would have killed Reed instantly. The dog was rushed to the station's newly established human medical bay, Reed refusing treatment until his companion was attended to. Ridiculous, Vox muttered to Dax as they observed from the monitoring station. Delaying his own treatment for an animal. The creature saved his life, Dax pointed out, and helped save this station earlier. Perhaps there is value in their bond that we do not fully comprehend. The human doctor emerged from surgery hours later, her expression grim as she approached Reed. I'm sorry, Captain. Max's injuries are too severe. We've made him comfortable, but she didn't need to finish. Vox watched Reed's face crumple, a display of emotion that would be considered shameful weakness among the Arcani. Yet strangely, none of the humans present seemed to judge their captain for this vulnerability. Instead, they gathered around him, offering what humans called comfort. Reed was allowed into the recovery area, where he sat beside the dying animal, stroking its fur and whispering to it. The monitor showed the dog's tail weakly thumping against the bed, a gesture of affection even in its final moments. Vox turned away, uncomfortable with the display. Inform me when the human is ready to discuss our next strategic move, he told Dax. Commander, Dax said hesitantly, by human custom, this is a time of mourning. It would be diplomatically unwise to press for strategic discussions immediately. Vox made a dismissive gesture. They waste time mourning an animal while the Morax regroup? This emotional indulgence is precisely why their species will never achieve true greatness. Neither of them realized that the internal communication system was still active, broadcasting Vox's words directly to the human medical bay. The temperature in the Alliance seemed to drop overnight. Human officers remained professional but distant. The easy camaraderie that had begun to develop between the species evaporated. Vox noticed the change but attributed it to battle fatigue. The Arcani didn't waste time on emotional recovery after losses. They analyzed, adapted, and continued fighting. Perhaps the humans needed more time to process their defeat despite the strategic victory. They're still attending memorial services for their fallen, Dax reported 3 days after the battle, including a separate ceremony for the captain's animal. Inefficient, Vox commented, reviewing tactical projections for the next Morax incursion. But as long as it doesn't interfere with combat readiness, let them observe their rituals. Dax hesitated before speaking again. Commander, there's something you should know. Your comments about Captain Reed's companion animal were transmitted to the human medical bay. They heard everything. Vox's posture stiffened. What comments? About emotional indulgence, and their species never achieving greatness. For the first time in his career, Vox felt something akin to what humans might call regret. Not for his assessment, which was logically sound, but for the diplomatic complication it created. The alliance was strategically valuable. Human unpredictability complemented Arcani precision in ways that had proven effective against the Morax. Arrange a meeting with Captain Reed, Vox ordered. I will clarify my position. The meeting never happened. Reed was found missing from the medical bay the next morning, along with several other high-ranking human officers. They had departed on a shuttle during the night shift, leaving behind a formal notice that they were re-establishing an independent command structure. The alliance wasn't officially dissolved, but it had effectively split into 2 separate forces. Human ships still coordinated with Arcani vessels but maintained their distance. The integrated command structure they had been building was abandoned. Vox was perplexed. This is illogical. Their chances of survival decrease by 64% without direct integration with our forces. With respect, Commander, said Lyra, who had recovered thanks to the human medical supplies. I don't believe this decision was made on purely logical grounds. The Morax, sensing the discord, launched a new offensive just days later. Without the seamless coordination they had been developing, both fleets struggled. The humans fought bravely, but recklessly, taking unnecessary risks. The Arcani maintained their disciplined approach, but lacked the creative adaptability the humans had brought to their tactics. During a particularly fierce engagement near the Lyra outpost, a human ship, the newly commissioned Vigilant under Reed's command, broke formation to protect an Arcani medical transport under heavy attack. The maneuver saved the transport and its 300 passengers, but left the Vigilant exposed. Vox watched the tactical display with growing alarm as Morax ships surrounded the human vessel. "They'll be destroyed," Dax said unnecessarily. Vox made an instant decision. "Divert Squadrons 3 and 4 to assist the Vigilant." The rescue operation succeeded, but at the cost of 2 Arcani fighters. When the battle ended, Vox requested Reed's presence on the command station. To his surprise, the human captain agreed. Reed looked different when he arrived. The wounds from the previous battle had healed, but something in his eyes had changed. A hardness that hadn't been there before. "Captain," Vox began formally, "your tactical decision to protect our medical transport was unexpected. We protect our allies, Commander, even when we don't particularly like them." The bluntness was jarring to Arcani sensibilities, but Vox pressed on. "Your actions saved many lives. However, it appears our alliance is no longer functioning optimally." "No," Reed agreed coldly. "It's not. My comments about your companion animal were overheard. I understand this has created friction." Reed's expression didn't change. "Max wasn't just a companion animal. He was a soldier who saved more lives than I can count, including mine, multiple times. He detected threats your advanced sensors missed. He found survivors your scanners overlooked, and yes, he provided emotional support that kept me and my crew functioning through hell." "I acknowledge his tactical utility," Vox conceded. "This isn't about tactical utility," Reed snapped. "It's about respect. Max died saving my life, saving this alliance, and you dismissed him, and by extension, all of us, as emotionally indulgent primitives." Vox was facing something unfamiliar, a diplomatic crisis he couldn't resolve with logic or tactical superiority. The human's emotional response seemed disproportionate to the actual issue, yet it was undeniably affecting combat effectiveness. For the first time, he considered that perhaps there was something about human emotional bonds that he fundamentally failed to understand. "Captain Reed," he began carefully, "by Arcani standards, forming attachments to non-sentient creatures is inefficient. We value our allies based on their strategic contributions, not emotional connections." "That's the problem," Reed replied. "You see everything, everyone, as a resource to be evaluated. We're not equipment for you to assess and discard." "That assessment is inaccurate," Vox countered. "The Arcani value life. We simply approach it from a rational perspective." Reed shook his head. "You know what Max did in his final moments? With shrapnel in his body and his systems failing, he licked my hand. He was comforting me while he was dying." His voice cracked slightly. "That's not just training or instinct. That's love. And you dismissed it as weakness." Vox's inner eyelids flickered rapidly as he processed this. The concept of a dying creature focusing on comforting another rather than its own survival contradicted Arcani understanding of natural behavior. It was inefficient, yes, but also somehow powerful in ways he hadn't considered. Before Vox could formulate a response, alarms blared throughout the station. Lieutenant Dax rushed into the chamber. "Commander, the Morax have deployed a new weapon. They've breached the defensive line at Taurus Junction. The colony there has gone silent." The personal conflict was immediately set aside as both commanders shifted to battle readiness. "What kind of weapon?" Reed demanded. Dax activated the holographic display. "Some form of biological agent. It targets neural pathways, causing rapid cellular degradation. Our preliminary analysis suggests it's specifically designed to affect Arcani physiology." Vox's scales seemed to lose their luster. They've adapted a weapon specifically against us. This changes the strategic equation significantly. I'll ready the human fleet, Reed said, already moving toward the door. Our physiology is different enough that we might have natural resistance. Captain, Vox called after him. We should coordinate our response. Reed paused. We'll coordinate tactically, Commander. But we're not reintegrating command structures. Not yet. The situation deteriorated rapidly. 3 more Arcani outposts went dark within hours. The biological agent spread faster than quarantine measures could contain it. Arcani scientists worked frantically to develop countermeasures, but time was running out. The human ships formed a protective cordon around key Arcani worlds, their crews indeed showing natural resistance to the Morax bioweapon. But they were too few to protect every Arcani settlement. Vox received the casualty reports with growing dread. The Morax had found the perfect weapon, one that targeted the Arcani specifically while leaving infrastructure intact for later consumption. 5 days into the crisis, human scientists on the medical frigate Pasteur reported a breakthrough. They had been studying the bioweapon and discovered something unexpected. The delivery mechanism is remarkably similar to a virus that affects Earth canines, the lead researcher explained over the secure channel. We've adapted vaccines originally, designed for dogs. Initial tests show 89% effectiveness in neutralizing the agent before it can damage Arcani neural tissue. Vox stared at the data in disbelief. You developed a cure based on dog medicine. The similarities are too specific to be coincidental, the researcher continued. We believe the Morax may have collected samples from fallen Earth animals during previous encounters and engineered their weapon from there. From Max, Reed said quietly from the doorway, having arrived for the briefing. They probably got samples when they attacked the horizon. They just didn't anticipate we'd recognize the similarities. The irony wasn't lost on anyone present. The very creature Vox had dismissed as a primitive emotional indulgence was now, even in death, providing the key to saving the Arcani species. Production of the vaccine began immediately, with human and Arcani medical teams working around the clock. The first batches were deployed to the most critical population centers, with human ships braving Morax attacks to deliver the precious cargo. As the crisis gradually came under control, something shifted in the Arcani perspective. The humans had committed their forces to protecting a species that had insulted them. They had developed a cure based on their understanding of the creatures many Arcani had dismissed as mere pets. In the quiet moments between crisis management, Vox found himself reflecting on what Reed had said about Max's final moments, about comfort and love transcending self-preservation. It was a paradigm that contradicted everything the Arcani valued, yet its results were undeniable. 2 weeks after the bioweapon attack, with the immediate crisis contained, Vox requested a private meeting with Captain Reed aboard the humans' new ship, the Vigilant. It was an unprecedented step. Arcani commanders never left their territory to meet on foreign vessels. The Vigilant was smaller than the Arcani flagship, but impressively functional. Human design prioritized adaptability over perfection, Vox noted. Corridors curved unnecessarily, but perhaps that improved defensive positions during boarding actions. Inefficient, but with purpose. Reed received him in a small conference room, adorned with what Vox recognized as memorials, images of fallen human crew members. And there, prominently displayed, was an image of Max. Thank you for meeting me on your territory, Vox began formally. It seemed appropriate. Reed nodded, but remained silent, waiting. The Arcani High Council has reviewed the events of the past weeks. Your species' contribution to our survival cannot be overstated. Vox paused, finding the next words difficult. I personally wish to acknowledge that my assessment of human emotional bonds, particularly regarding your companion, was flawed. Reed's expression softened slightly. Are you apologizing, Commander? I am revising my analysis based on new data, Vox replied carefully. What you call love, the capacity to value another being beyond its tactical utility, appears to yield results that pure logic cannot predict. A small smile crossed Reed's face. That might be the closest thing to an emotional insight I've ever heard from an Arcani. Perhaps there is value in understanding emotions, even for a species that does not experience them as you do. Vox gestured to the image of Max. Your companion's genetic structure saved millions of my people. His sacrifice continues to protect us. By any measure, logical or emotional. That deserves recognition. Reed studied Vox for a long moment. You know what really bothered me about what you said? Not that you dismissed Max. He wouldn't have cared. What you thought of him. It was that you used him to dismiss all of humanity. You decided that because we form bonds you don't understand, we could never achieve greatness. Vox's inner eyelids flickered, an admission of discomfort. That assessment was premature and incorrect. Your species has achieved greatness by measures even the Arcani must acknowledge. The tension in the room dissipated slightly. Reed offered Vox a seat, and for the first time since the rift, they began to discuss strategy as allies rather than reluctant cooperators. The Morax had retreated to regroup after their bioweapon failed, but intelligence suggested they were developing new approaches. The war was far from over. We need to take the fight to them, Reed suggested. Hit their production facilities before they can develop more weapons. Aggressive action carries significant risk, Vox countered. Our forces are still recovering. Sometimes, the greatest risk is taking no risk at all, Reed said. It's something humans understand instinctively. We bond with animals that could hurt us. We love despite knowing we might lose. We take chances because the alternative is never really living. At all. Vox considered this philosophy so foreign to Arcani thinking. Your approach defies optimal strategy, yet it produces results our models fail to predict. That's humanity for you, Reed smiled. Defying prediction since we first looked up at the stars. As the strategic session continued, a new integrated approach began to emerge, one that leveraged both human intuition and Arcani precision. The alliance was rebuilding, stronger for having been tested. When the meeting concluded, Vox paused at the memorial wall, studying the image of Max. Captain, I would like to propose something unprecedented. The Arcani wish to create a memorial, on our homeworld, for all who have fallen in this war, including the non-human Earth creatures who served alongside you. Would this be acceptable to your people? Reed appeared genuinely surprised. That would mean a great deal to us, Commander. It is logical to honor those who have contributed to our survival, Vox said, then added more hesitantly. And perhaps it is also right. As Vox departed the Vigilant, he reflected on how radically his understanding had shifted. The humans' emotional connections, to each other, to their companion creatures, even to the Arcani, weren't weaknesses to be overcome. They were different kinds of strength. The Arcani had survived for millennia by perfect logic and strategic calculation. But to thrive in this new reality, perhaps they needed to learn something that couldn't be calculated. Something about bonds, that transcended utility, about sacrifice born not from duty, but from what humans called love. 6 months later, the combined human Arcani fleet launched its boldest operation yet, a direct assault on the Morax Central Hive Cluster. Intelligence gathered from joint operations had finally revealed the location of the Morax Queens, who coordinated the hive mind across vast distances. The battle plan melded Arcani precision with human adaptability in ways that would have been unimaginable a year earlier. Human ships performed maneuvers that Arcani strategists deemed illogically effective, while Arcani vessels provided the technological edge that humanity still lacked. On the bridge of the Arcani flagship, Vox and Reed stood side by side, watching the tactical display as the fleet engaged the Morax defenders. Second wave, commence attack pattern Delta, Vox ordered, his voice calm despite the chaos unfolding before them. Human squadrons, you have tactical freedom within parameters, Reed added. Trust your instincts. The resulting battle was unlike anything either species had executed before. Where the Arcani would have formed perfect, predictable formations, the human elements introduced controlled chaos that the Morax swarm couldn't anticipate. Where humans might have taken excessive risks, Arcani restraint provided strategic balance. They pushed deeper into Morax territory. Vox noticed something on a secondary monitor. A small emblem that human ships had added to their hulls. It depicted a stylized dog silhouette against a starfield. For Max, Reed explained, following his gaze, and for what he taught both our species. The Morex defenses were formidable, but the joint fleet pushed through to the inner sanctum where the queens resided. Here, they encountered a final line of defenders, Morax elite warriors twice the size of their regular drones. They're concentrating everything they have on protecting the queens, Dax reported from his station. If we can neutralize them, the entire hive mind will collapse across this sector. What followed was the fiercest fighting of the entire war. Human ships darted between massive Morex cruisers, drawing fire to create openings for Arcani precision strikes. Arcani vessels held the line with unwavering discipline, while human boarding parties executed high-risk assaults on key targets. Casualties mounted on both sides. The fleet lost a third of its strength, pushing toward the central chamber where scans indicated the queens were gathered. "We're too far from our objective," Vox noted grimly. "At current attrition rates, we will not have sufficient forces to complete the mission." Reed studied the tactical display intently. "There's another way. A small strike team could use the battle as cover to approach from this vector." He indicated a maintenance shaft that led directly to the Queen's chamber. "It would be undetected." "Because it's too small for any ship to navigate," Vox finished. "The risk would be unacceptable." "Not for a single shuttle with volunteer crew," Reed countered. "If they carry the bioagent we've developed specifically for the Queens, they'd only need to reach release range." Their eyes met, understanding passing between them. "You're proposing a suicide mission," Vox stated flatly. "I'm proposing giving meaning to our losses," Reed corrected. "Sometimes, Commander, the most logical choice isn't the one with the highest survival probability. It's the one that ensures something survives." Vox remembered Max, dying but still offering comfort. He remembered the humans treating their fallen, even the non-human ones, with honor, rather than just tactical regret. "I will lead the strike team," Vox decided. Reed shook his head. "No, this is my play. You're needed to command the fleet if this works." "Then we both go," Vox said with finality. "A joint mission, as this alliance should be." The small shuttle departed the flagship, amid the chaos of battle, carrying Vox, Reed, and 4 volunteers, 2 human, 2 Arcani. They navigated the maintenance shaft with precision, evading Morax sensors by employing a technique based on canine stealth movements, developed, ironically, from studying recordings of Max during combat operations. They reached the Queen chamber, undetected, only to discover a final obstacle, a sealed barrier that required manual override from both sides simultaneously. One team enters, one stays to ensure the door reopens for extraction, Reed concluded after examining the mechanism. Vox calculated the odds silently. Those who enter will have approximately 47 seconds to deploy the bioagent before Morex defenders respond. Those who remain will be exposed when the system detects the door activation. They all understood the implications. Someone would not be returning. "I'll go in," Reed volunteered immediately. "Lieutenant Park will accompany me." "I will join you," said Dax, who had insisted on being part of the mission. "The bioagent delivery requires Arcani authorization codes." The plan was set. Vox and the remaining team members would hold the door controls, fighting off Morex defenders, long enough for Reed's team to deploy the weapon and return, if they could return at all. As Reed prepared to enter the chamber, he paused and extended his hand to Vox, a human gesture of respect and connection. "Whatever happens, Commander, remember what we learned from each other. Remember Max." Vox took the human's hand in a grip that would have once seemed alien to him. "For the Alliance." "For something greater than that," Reed replied. "For understanding." The inner team moved quickly, reaching the central platform where the Queens pulsed with bioelectric energy, coordinating their vast hive across the stars. The bioagent was deployed just as Morex guards detected the intrusion. Outside, Vox and his team fought desperately, holding back waves of defenders. The maintenance corridor filled with the sounds of combat as they defended the door controls, with everything they had. Minutes stretched like hours. Then, through the chaos of battle, Vox heard the inner door mechanism activate. Reed and Park emerged, dragging the injured Dax between them. "It's done," Reed gasped, blood streaming from a wound in his side. "The Queens are neutralized." They fought their way back to the shuttle, each step a battle for survival. Of the 6 who had embarked on the mission, Only 4 returned to the fleet, battered, wounded, but victorious. Throughout Morex-controlled space, the hive mind collapsed. Without the Queen's guidance, the once fearsome swarm fell into disarray, their ships drifting or fighting among themselves as their shared consciousness fragmented. The war that had raged for centuries ended not with the annihilation of either side, but with a strategic strike made possible by an alliance of unlikely partners. 1 month later, on the Arcani homeworld of Taro, a monument was unveiled. It stood in the central plaza of the capital city, a place where no alien had ever been honored before. The monument depicted an Arcani warrior and a human soldier standing side by side, and at their feet, rendered in perfect detail, was a dog named Max. The inscription, written in both Arcani script and human English, read simply, "To those who taught us that greatness comes in many forms, heroes are measured not by logic alone, but by what they are willing to protect." Commander Vox stood beside Captain Reed as crowds of both species gathered for the ceremony. The alliance had evolved into something more, a true partnership of complementary strengths. "Your people once believed we could never achieve greatness," Reed remarked quietly, gazing up at the monument. "We were wrong," Vox acknowledged. "Perhaps greatness isn't what we thought it was." Above them, in the night sky, the stars shone, on a galaxy forever changed, not by conquest or perfect strategy, but by understanding that had come from the most unexpected of teachers, a hero, an ally, a friend,